Hello, everyone. So, I talked about this about a few months ago. Now we have kind of figures, I suppose you would say. And this is just from the other day, about 2 days ago. And this is to do with basically to do with pubs and to do with alcohol, etc. We talk about now and I can get into all the details. But yeah, it basically found that 50% of Irish drinkers, people who drink say on the weekend or during the week, right? Drink at home now. To go to the off licenses, to go to places like Superfire, etc. to buy their drink and bring it home with them basically on the weekend instead of going out, say, to the pub, etc. Now, you're probably like to yourself, what's the problem here? I tell you many problems. Just give me a few seconds, go through a good bit. So, first of all, the main problem is years ago, of course, many people would not go to the off licenses, they would go to the pub and socialise. And I do take, and I don't drink alcohol, I never drank alcohol in my life. But I do think it's good that people can go to the pub and socialise, see people there, talk to people. Because when you're at home on your own, I do think it's the most saddest thing, particularly if you're drinking yourself. And in some cases, they say in this article, it's not just one drink we're talking about; it's multiple. We're talking about nearly. I think one article said it was about nine there. There's an average person that's drinking their own. It's about 9 or 8 on the weekend on their own, and they're on their own in a lot of cases. A lot of them are like people who live on their own, etc. And I do think it's very sad because they're on their own drinking on their own. It's a bad thing. It's a bad mindset. I think it creates a bad mindset. Even if you're not in a bad mindset, I think it does create a bad mindset that you're drinking on your own, etc. At least if you're in with friends in the pub or even with people around you, you have some kind of atmosphere around you. But when you're on your own and sitting on your own, you feel lonely. You do feel lonely. Compared to say being in the pub, etc. But the simple reality is, compared to years ago, it's too expensive nowadays to go out and get a drink or to even with a few friends, etc. It's far too expensive. You could not afford it. If you were having two or three, or even more than that, you could not afford it, and then you can't go home in your car. You would have to get a taxi, the train, or whatever. In rural Ireland, that doesn't exist. But you get what I'm saying. And it's really worrying to see, especially when you hear the next bit that a lot of pubs are closing now. A lot of pubs in a lot of towns, used to be 5 or 6 pubs in towns. Now there's only maybe one. So it's huge closures around the country. In Cavan, take WhatsApp alone, there were so many pubs before COVID they were opened and after COVID they closed. Just people couldn't afford to go out anymore to pubs, etc. And it's a very worrying trend because a lot of jobs have been lost. A lot of businesses, pubs that have been open for hundreds of years. The pubs that's open, I think there was one pub that was open nearly 200 years that closed down recently, just down the country, and that's 200 years of history, and it's gone just within a week. It's gone. It's simple as that, and it's sad to see. But again, they can't afford to keep the pubs open. There's nobody going to them. They can't afford to because the pubs make very little money off it. It's more goes to the tax, etc., and the pint, etc. Goes towards the government and the distillery, etc. So it is worrying to see, as I say, because this is worrying to see at home because people will usually be depressed at home, etc., if they're on their own, etc. And of course, it has economic consequences too. What I mean by that, of course, the cost of going to the pub, etc., is up, and of course, that means that pubs are closing because nobody's going to them, and of course, that's leading to job closures, etc. And it's worrying to see, but it is very, very worrying because a lot of people are on their own, and it's sad to see. But I do think we have to look at this as a society. Even though I would say the best thing to do is not to drink at all, you'd save a lot of money, etc. And you think you're more healthier, but again, it's up to people's own choice. But that's always what I was about, Calvin people. But yes, you get my point. You get my point. It is worrying to see because especially there's so many people on the own. As to say, a lot of people drink a lot of beers like on the own, and they're on their own themselves. There's nobody there with them. And it's sad to see because at least if you're in the pub, you're talking to people. You may be chatting to people, etc. But when you're on your own, there's nobody to chat to, and it feels very lonely. And it feels very sad. Um, but it's something we have to look at in society because, as I say, even years ago, people could drink and drive, which was probably it was dangerous. Don't get me wrong, it's dangerous to drink and drive, but that wasn't in take us up even 20 years ago. That you could drink and drive, etc. Without having 1 or 2 pints, you could probably drive home. But nowadays that doesn't exist. But in a lot of cases too, as I say, here in a lot of rural places, we're talking about rural parishes in, say, for example, Cavan or in Laois and Offaly, etc. Places like that, like not in Dublin City or in Cork, etc. But in rural parishes that take for example that if you were going to have a few pints in the local pub, you couldn't drive the car because basically you wouldn't be able to drive it home. So a lot of people don't go out because of that too. That's another reason too, in rural Ireland particularly. Because why would you walk home, say, for example, if you have a good few jars on you at 12 o'clock at night on a dark country road, take for example, But yeah, there's lots of things to look at, but we do have to look at it because there's a lot of pubs closing down. And the simple reality about pubs, local pubs, etc., particularly in rural Ireland, they're part of Ireland's history. They have a huge history. A lot of pubs that take us up in communities, etc., for hundreds of years, have loads of history. Many things were talked about. Many historical things were talked about in them pubs. You would have huge significance, to counties, to towns, to villages, etc. In every breadth, every length and breadth of the country. So it's unfortunate to see. But do let me know what you think. Do you drink at home? Do you go out now and again, like every once a month? What's the story? Because people simply don't have the money nowadays, to be totally honest. But do let me know what you think. Subscribe for more and bye.